I live in Rocksville, Virginia. The only song I know is Master Onion, which I got from a demo I borrowed from my friend Megan. Turn and pose, duck and turn, duck and turn. We're gonna jump and pose, jump, pose. Rap, rap, rap. That's a rap.
What can Chris Chan tell us about The Joker 2019? Yes, I'm serious. The Joker 2019 is a tale of a troubled upbringing, bullying, a dirty environment, classism, and a societal dysfunction in the proper treatment of mental health that eventually coalesces into a Molotov cocktail of radical anarchy. When the movie was initially teased, people who, ironically, are clearly not functioning adults, assumed this would be an incel movie that would give way to a new generation of Elliot Rodger-esque characters, seeking blood as redemption for their lack of TNA. When going about analyzing the movie, The Joker 2019, I think it's worth opening a case study in which we may compare real cases of mental health, bullying, and hard upbringings, and use them to understand how the actions may lead to such results, or in layman's terms, how fact may inform fiction. Most stories that feature troubled protagonists or characters are in some way inspired by real-life occurrences. I mean, to be honest, almost all writers are inspired by happenstances around their lives, whether they mean to project them onto their writing or not. So I'm not saying that writer Scott Silver, director Todd Phillips, nor leading actor Joaquin Phoenix were directly inspired by this particular case of note, but Christine Chandler, stop laughing, is the most documented human being in all of recorded history. Therefore, they represent the most transparent and infamous possible comparison to an actual case, and an eerily similar one at that. Barring maybe people like the Unabomber or the aforementioned Elliot Rodger, whom we have in-depth information about, but the information stems from an unreliable and unstable autobiographical narration. The uniqueness of comparing Christine Chandler is how similar in origin, yet divergent in outcome, the fictional character of The Joker 2019 and Christine really are.
Hello. I am well known on the internet, sadly.
Now, Chris's story is still ongoing, and I don't want this video to be taken in any way as an excuse to bully her, nor should people actively seek her out to mess with her. Like, seriously, dude, leave her alone. She's already been through enough. This video is merely a vessel as to how the cases of Christine and the Joker 2019's life and transformations align and yet depart, trying to find a core as to how we can actually learn valuable lessons about the real world from the lens of a fictional protagonist. I will be utilizing context-sensitive pronouns for Chris, he in his younger days, and she post-transition. This isn't to insult her nor to demean her preferred pronouns. This is simply to help better understand the chronology of these two characters, Joker 2019 and Christine, donning their makeup and how their lives and choices impacted their decisions and their personal happiness. I'd also like to give a wicked special shout out to Gino Samuel's comprehensive history of Chris Chan, as second only to the Quickie itself. It exists as most likely the best chronological resource for knowledge on Chris's life. If it isn't obvious, I don't plan on dissecting Chris's autism, nor blame Arthur Fleck's behavior on autism. That'd be stupid. I intend to get to the roots of what life events may influence their quirks, and how the cause and effect may be similar yet divergent. Their life occurrences only really end up enhanced in significance by their disabilities, at the most. Chris Chan is a very extreme and highly notorious case of high-functioning autism. Autism is a developmental disability that hinders a human being's ability to communicate and interact. Everyone on this earth is in some way on the spectrum of autism to different extremes. Chris Chan just so happens to possess a very far extreme of that spectrum. When Chris was 18 months old, his parents, Bob and Barb, left him with a babysitter named Roche, who grew impatient and angry with Chris because he was trying to speak to her while she was on the phone, and she punished him for speaking to her by locking him alone in his room for hours upon hours, surrounded by nothing but toys, leaving him there to cry. Chris blames this very traumatic event for his autism, as after this point in his life is when he began an extended period where he refused to speak. I don't think an event like this can actually cause autism, but at such a young developmental age, a traumatic event like this can absolutely mold him into a more nervous person, and it's not unreasonable to attribute this and events like it to his stutter, general nervous manner of speaking, and with his toy surroundings when locked in that room, it can even be attributed to his perpetual childlike obsessions. As Christine, in this current day, ironically, voluntarily locks herself in a room with toys as a safe space. Like I said, these quirks could be made more significant by having autism, but in actuality, this isn't the cause. The actual cause was likely a result of his parents, Barb and Bob Chandler, giving birth to him at a very old age. Barb in particular being in her 40s when she gave birth to Chris, and Bob being even older. In the case of Fleck, his laughter in the face of the horrible is a metaphor as well as a mental tic. He uncontrollably bursts out laughing at inappropriate times because he's either genuinely nervous or unsure of what to do or what other people find funny. The pseudobular effect, a condition which causes bouts of nervous laughter, is a legitimate affliction, which is treatable by medication and therapy sessions as we see in the movie. It can be triggered by an intense emotional reaction that the body inadvertently and sometimes uncontrollably projects as uncontrollable laughter. Fleck is not provably high-functioning autistic, and the only named disorder that he has in the movie is in some ways curable. Chris's autism is not curable.
I want to get rid of that lifelong curse that I've had.
However, Chris's speech impediment, like Arthur's fits of laughter, are treatable, and it should not be overlooked that an early onset of emotional abuse likely fueled both of their impediments and life perspectives. Arthur Fleck suffered from short-term memory loss, so his actual revelation to his trauma wasn't ingrained within him, at least consciously. Chris, however, seems to remember this event very well despite his young age, but it is equally likely that he was informed of this occurrence later by his half-brother, Cole Smithy. Fleck was abandoned as a child, but taken in by his adopted mother, Penny Fleck, who never told Arthur of his real parents, and potentially lied about Thomas Wayne being his father. Fleck was both physically and emotionally abused by Penny's boyfriend at the time, suffering from serious head trauma, emotional stunting, and likely leading to his pseudobular condition, as well as many other social instabilities. He only discovered this happen much later in life, and that his mother idly stood by watching him be beaten. Enraged, while in the hospital after his mother suffered a stroke and at her lowest point, he kills his mother, suffocating her with a pillow, retroactively killing his past and the few morals she did try to instill within him, taking on a new identity as Joker 2019, abandoning his Fleck namesake. Christine, on the other hand, doesn't feel scorn towards her parents for continuing to hire Roche. As she puts it, they simply did not know better. Christian also has a very elderly mother, but he wasn't an illegitimate child. He's the result of one second and one third marriage and two very late attempts at parenthood. Both Chris and Fleck live in very worn out environments, one in the New York, Chicago-esque Gotham City and the other in near nowhere Ruckersville, Virginia. Although there's no evidence of physical abuse by his parents towards Chris, we can see plenty from Barb's second marriage through her husband, Jerry Harmon, and Barb herself, towards Chris's half-brother Cole Smithy. According to Cole, this came in the form of ice showers, bare-ass beatings, and bizarre scenarios. Smithy today is a successful film critic who, rightfully so, has near entirely distanced himself from Barb and Bob, with only sparse communications with Christine. Bob likely forced Cole and his mother even further apart. As Cole states, he'd never met a meaner, more reprehensible Republican cur than Bob Chandler, who worked his influence over Barb to sever whatever ties Cole and Barb would have had left. I'm working through Cole as a lens to some extent, because we don't really hear much from Chris to this level of severity. Chris, like the Joker 2019, is an unreliable narrator, constantly lying about his life and bolstering false accomplishments. The most we know about poor treatment from his parents is they scolded him, and we get to hear a few voice calls of them doing so. Chris did suffer from emotional abuse from plenty of his peers as a child, one of which being when he was tricked by his next-door neighbor and close friend Sarah Hammer into looking under the house for Casper the Friendly Ghost, who Sarah told Chris lived under there. When Chris entered the crawl space, however, Sarah locked him in. It's not known how long he was under there before Sarah's dad grew wise to it and let him out, freeing Chris from the darkness, claustrophobia, isolation, and spiders. Beyond this, Chris's living environment definitely had an impact on him. Barbara demonstrates numerous instances of hoarding, sloth, and sociopathy, and Bob is the most stereotypically old-minded, racist southern persona you could possibly picture.
You get your black ass down in the gutter and stay there.
Travis Bickle, like Christian, shows many racist qualities brought about because of his Shit. Arthur Fleck is never shown to be racist. He's self-labeled as apolitical, the same way Christian labels himself as apolitical. But Fleck actually sticks up for the little guys, and fantasizes about having a relationship with a black woman, something Chris would have never ever dreamed of doing due to his ingrained bigotry at that time.
Goddamn womanizing, raping, trolling, stupid, pickle-suited Nick.
Cole Smithy and Chris currently have a very strained relationship, despite evidence of Cole and Chris previously getting along very well. As a child, Chris once visited Cole in California, giving him a Lego bandstand as a New Year's gift, but then went on to write about Cole being muy feo, or very ugly, in Chris's Spanish classes at school. This is likely due to Barbara's influence on him, who would regularly speak poorly of Cole in front of Chris, rather than this coming from Chris's own perception of Cole. To go back to Joker 2019, Penny Fleck lied about Arthur's lineage, most likely, saying he was the son of Thomas Wayne. This is never confirmed or denied, but likely untrue considering Penny's mental state and her obsession with Wayne. Chris is definitely the son of Bob, but in Cole's case, he's had to go as far as to hire a private detective to locate his own father. This is because Barb insists to him that his father is Jack Dale Smithy, even if genetic evidence says to the contrary, that is actually a man named Rand Coleman Yeats. Barbara will never admit to lying about this and constantly doubles down on this. But Barb, like Christian, is a compulsive liar, and also likes to bolster things that she found from Ancestry.com, like saying that they're descendants of Anne Boleyn, an English queen, and holding this in high regard. Barbara Chandler and Penny Fleck might even be more alike than Chris and Arthur. Barbara's hoarding habits are the main reason for Chris's shoddy overall living environment. Fleck's is fueled from poverty, due to him being the only one working to support his elderly mother at a very low-tier minimum wage job. Although Christine's situation resembles that a lot more now, before this his family had a decent amount of money due to Bob Chandler's many patents with General Electric and his pensions as a plastic mold engineer. Barbara obsessively hoarded multiple items from throughout her life despite expired usage, which apexed at poor sanitation being a likely cause of Bob Chandler's death, and later serving to spread a house fire. The hoarding situation had grown so severe that it was impossible to navigate many parts of the house. Cat poop occasionally finding its way wherever it wanted, Chris once stating to have slipped on it, and an aged Christmas tree from 10 years ago once sat forever in a corner of the living room until it eventually burned down. This all ended up attracting parasitic insects to the home, which made every room near unlivable except for Christian's, which was ironically the cleanest in the house. The parasitic insects inflicted several bites onto Bob, and this caused bloating of his feet, and due to potential contamination, after being rushed to the hospital, he had to be quarantined. Although Bob does have a history of heart failures, the insects could have easily worsened his condition. He can even be heard moaning in pain in the background of some of Chris's videos.
I'm cool with you gays, you know? You go do what you want to do, just, you know?
After Bob's passing, Barb commandeered Chris's room for the night to cry, leaving Chris alone to sleep on the couch in a parasite-infested house. Left alone now with an elderly guardian, we're now in an Arthur Fleck-like scenario. where a lone son, or in this case daughter, with a disability is tasked with taking care of their old, also mentally unsound mother. But Christine didn't go through a transition in the same manner that Fleck transformed into the Joker 2019. Like Arthur, Chris finds joy in the freedom and artistry and looseness of dance, both finding themselves and finding zen within the freedom and abstraction of the movements, and both feeling confident in out-of-the-norm costumes or made-up forms. Chris choosing to do so in the comfort of his home, at public parks, and at cross-dressing clubs. Arthur finds confidence in the mask of his clown makeup, concealing his identity and granting him the ability as a symbol to do anything with. In Christine's case, she found her true happiness when slowly transitioning into, as she puts it, a tomgirl. Essentially a man with a female soul, sexually identifying as a lesbian, who uses she pronouns but still has a penis. A little addendum here, she actually identifies as a woman and a lesbian now. She's no longer a tomgirl. That was an old definition. She's now a lesbian woman. But despite not wanting to cut off her dick, she's doing her damnedest to develop breasts and push forward. She finds confidence and comfort dressing up as a girl, wearing makeup, bras, and keeping the companionship of woman as a woman. Fleck worked as a clown before donning the makeup as a symbol and gained his first 3 kills while donning this makeup. Chris actively denied his feminine side due to antagonism and homophobia from Bob and Barb for most of his life. Raised homophobic, xenophobic, except for anime and Japanese games, and extremely racist during his earlier life. She's now blossomed into a new woke individual sometime before Bob's passing that steadily grew and grew until we get to what she is in the current day, with Barb at some point suddenly deciding that she approved of it. Although not necessarily a male-on-male homosexual,
I love all gays and lesbians!
she no longer feels the need to go on long rants about how much she hates gay men and transgenders.
I hate the homos.
Which he likely used as a defense mechanism early in his life to fight against his intense feminine internalizations. Already, he had always gotten along better with girls and always hated men. Even the sight of them shirtless, he goes on rants about how much he hates pecs. So it almost makes sense that this would be our final result, a constant rejection of masculinity, resulting in a self-rejection of masculinity. The people who had followed Christine the closest would have absolutely seen this coming before it was even confirmed. She once attempted to forcefully grow a vagina by listening to binaural beats and then stabbing a kitchen knife between her thighs, cutting one open. And there is some potential that Joker 2008, played by Heath Ledger, had self-inflicted wound. Okay, no. We're gonna stick to Joaquin's Joker 2019, alright? Fleck and Chandler both go through bouts with the mental health system. In Fleck's case, his social worker, at least seems to me, be mostly unhelpful. She did help keep him stable and did enable him to get access to the drugs that were keeping him controlled. But during meetings we see she looks and sounds like she could not care less what happens to Fleck. She just feels to me like she just wants him to get in, do his hour, and then get out. The problem is, despite the unfulfilling nature of them, work and therapy were Arthur Fleck's only healthy outlets. When betrayed by his co-worker and fired, and when the state cuts his treatments, he's left only to devolve deeper and deeper into insanity, cut away from his drugs and his outlets within the same compressed, lonely, filthy, old environment with only his insane mother and the fantasy of a father figure and a girlfriend for his companionship. Chris has gone through several varied bouts with mental health and therapy, some of which stemming from actual therapists, some stemming from teachers, some from close friends, many of which attempted to help him or do more for him, but were inevitably cut off by Bob and Barb, who wanted to do everything themselves, stubborn in their nature. Like those normal people who just offer advice end up being painted as antagonists by Chris for daring to criticize him within this advice. He's plopped into an echo chamber at the Chandler household in which there is an active refusal to acknowledge his faults as his own. The longest standing therapeutic relationship she's held is with her pastoral counselor, Rocky Shoemaker, between the years of 2008 to Rocky's retirement in 2018. Rocky was underqualified to deal with the intense severity of the issues Chris faced, unfortunately. And although attempting to give good advice and genuinely managing to do some good for them, she was ultimately undermined by, you guessed it, Chris's parents, and Chris's own stubbornness. Despite this, they continued to seek her help due to her godly connections. She managed to help Christine in alleviating many of her life antagonists, the trolls and the weens, but failed to save Christine from herself and her own negative habits. For example, obesity, sending news to strangers, and general laziness. And during her retirement in 2018, she even recommended Christine seek legitimate therapy for her own problems. So now left without Rocky, Christine is like Fleck, trapped and isolated in an old house, surrounded by old junk and taking care of a now senile mother. Fleck had desired a father and a father figure, having never had one, while Chris lost hers and once pined for a sister, having never had one and desiring one. Coincidentally, in Fleck's case, the death of his mother symbolizes a transformation of character and an escape to freedom, in some ways like the passing of Bob to Chris. Joker 2019's mother was like a chain holding him back, always depending on him, his work, his job, forcefully isolating him to do everything with her, to take care of her, as the only female companion in his life, and his only source of joy. But it was all a lie. Chris attempted a few times to free himself from this fate early on, once personally driving all the way to Ohio by himself on a wild goose chase to save his beloved girlfriend, Julie, from her troll kidnappers, Blue Spike and Clyde Cash, going under the alias of Max Melvania. When during the wee hours of the day, Bob and Barb awoke to find him gone, they panicked, called the police, and did everything in their power to bring him back, before Chris simply came back on his own, having driven all the way to Ohio to a house occupied by an old lady with no Julie having ever been there, nor any trolls having ever been there, because Chris was lied to. There never was a Julie. It was actually a 14-year-old, a little shit named Blue Spike, pretending to be a girl so as to bully and deceive him.
This whole time, Chris, you've been having sex with a 13-year-old boy, you sick fuck!
What?
Later attempts to leave the state of Virginia and sort of Ruckersville were met with backlash. What should have been a simple trip from Ruckersville to Boston to meet another potential girlfriend, Ivy, was met with intense antagonism from his mother, saying Chris is trying to tear the family apart. Bob and Barb perpetually making financial excuses for their reasons to not take an 8-hour drive. Chris having previously been almost tricked into flying to Seattle to meet with Shigeru Miyamoto, a actual troll attempt, he was stopped by his parents. But this isn't Seattle we're talking about, this isn't a flight. But still, they constantly made excuses and money reasons for Chris to not take a simple 8-hour drive, until Ivy eventually grew tired of him and leaked all of Chris's illicit flirting materials to the internet, eventually being broadcasted on major radio networks in Los Angeles, Boston, and even the Opie and Anthony show.
I recycle my own semen.
Wait a minute. He recycles it.
Yes.
So now there's only. Does he eat it?
The man's a complete asshole.
And what should have been even simpler than a flight to Seattle, a drive to Ohio, or even Boston, came up. MagFest, only one state over at the Gaylord Harbor in Maryland. Barb threatened suicide and accused Chris of trying to tear the family apart by daring to go to a convention alone when he was in his mid-20s. Although Christine today has much more freedom, making appearances at the close-by Too Many Games in Philadelphia and BronyCon in also Maryland, in his earlier days he didn't dare to defy his parents. And if he ever leaned too far, Barb threatened to kill herself. Barb is very, very quick to threaten suicide, even over very minor things. Like, Bob and Chris had actually once combated her in saying, hey, we need to clean this house and throw some of this clutter away. So in order to get her way, Barb threatened suicide. Chris was getting bullied way too much by trolls, and the Chandler household was getting a ton of crank calls, so Barb threatened suicide. Like seriously, Barb either gets her way or she threatens to end her life. It's horrible. Barb and Christine have a very surreal relationship, Christine admitting to spooning and having a few sexualized dreams involving her mother. But she stands by the fact that she keeps all these things to herself. She keeps it in the dreams. They're not going to go any further than that, despite having spooned.
Who do you take pictures of? Just you. Oh. Yes, I love you. Oh. You know, you're very pretty. You're always pretty.
Fleck's relationship with his mother is odd, but we don't see too much beyond the general discomfort of a grown man living with his aging mom. My brain wants to say there was a bathing scene in the movie, but was that just in the trailer? What was the context of that? And to be fair, Fleck is kind of being noble here. He's taking care of her in her old age and even sacrificing his own health and diet in favor of supporting her. Barb refuses to ever cook for Bob and Chris, which likely led to Chris's poor diet and fast food eating habits. After Bob and Chris had spent many years apart when he was at a young age attending school in another town, they returned to the Chandler house in Ruckersville. And Barb made them a spaghetti dinner and they looked at it and said, we don't feel like eating it. And their refusal to eat the spaghetti dinner resulted in Barb saying she would never cook for them again if they didn't eat it. And they didn't eat it. A woman of her word, she has not cooked for them since. Which Chris, being too lazy to cook or teach himself to cook, is forced to subsist off of instant food and fast food. In Christine's case, Barb is still here with us, and she loves her, so she'd never think about or threaten to kill her. But Bob's passing opened many doors for Chris in terms of personal freedoms, despite having shut many more financially. In fact, near instantaneously upon Bob's death, Chris sold all of his father's possessions inherited to him on eBay, items he was instructed to treasure. As you probably figured out from the above descriptions, Chris suffered very severe bullying due to his quirks, much like Fleck. Fleck was heavily taken advantage of for his oddities. A coworker ratted him out to get him fired by giving him a firearm, mocking him later, and then feigning ignorance after growing scared of Joker 2019 seeking revenge. Children steal a sign from him and then beat him up on the street just because he looks weird and they're bored and he's acting weird, so fuck him, beat him up. Mocked by a man that Fleck once considered a father figure who he fantasized about, all because Fleck bombed during a stand-up routine that was on recording. Punched in the face by a man who he thought would be his father, Thomas Wayne. Looked at with scorn by the general public for his nervous laughter. Men on the subway beat him up just because he laughed when they harassed a girl. But by then Fleck had a gun and he was able to shoot all three of them. But in that comes our first major departure, the general sense of morality between these two characters. One of them's not a character, one of them's a real person, I apologize. Fleck's upbringing and perpetual treatment led him down a destructive path as a radical. Despite his mom trying to instill good qualities within him, the revelation of her lies and the shunning of two men he thought of as father figures destroyed his sense of morality, along with being cut off from his medication. Whereas Chris's moral compass is much more aligned with pacifism, almost in contrast to his parents' more aggressive tendencies. They did their best to teach him to be good, but did their worst in creating an influence for him. As far as firearms go, the most severe instance Chris has had was using a Megatron pistol on a dartboard to shoot at a picture of a guy who had beat him in a Parappa the Rappa rapping contest. He's never actually shot anyone. To be honest, I don't think she ever will. Christine has had things really hard in her life and has constantly, even on a daily basis to this day, treated cruelly and unfairly. But it's not in her nature to kill, at least directly. She's gotten violent at times, and she's gotten close to murder at times, but wait, the murder was only in fantasies, never actually acting out on any of her murderous thoughts. However, this is only with the trolls. There were two known instances of physical retaliation with Christine, one of which you may know of. It was pretty famous. She maced a GameStop employee because she was vandalizing Sonic boom carts because she strongly detested the color of Sonic's arms. You've definitely heard about that one. That one was huge.
Don't call anybody.
There was another one before this, however, that's not so much in the public eye, likely because it's not associated with the Sonic fandom. She and Barbara had made their way to a former hotspot of Christine's and noticed that a store that she used to like, the Game Place, one which she was previously banned from for her disrespect of other customers, was under new management by a man named Mike, and they decided to go in hoping that this man, Mike, was not the same Michael Snyder who had previously banned her. And then she wandered in only to discover that the Mike was the Michael Snyder who had banned her, and he was the manager now. Christine snapped a picture of him on her 3DS, and based on police reports, it can be assumed that the two got into a scuffle, being followed by Snyder, who had just called the police. And when this happened, Christine had apparently struck Michael Snyder with her vehicle. Twice. Once where Christine struck him before switching seats, allowing Barbara to strike him again. Police arrived after this had happened, and there's a chance that Barb, assaulted the police officers for attempting to arrest her daughter. The exact occurrences in this event are not the clearest, as we only have testimonies and a vague police report to go off of. But at the very least, Christine did strike Snyder with her car, possibly because Snyder had thrown himself onto her hood to stop Christine from escaping before police arrived, or possibly because Christine just decided, I don't like this guy, I'm gonna run him over. So this is kinda like Arthur Fleck, no? Fired from his position as a game curator at the Game Place for scaring young children, and then enacting revenge on the older man who got him banned in the first place? I think that's a bit of a stretch. I don't. I think I'm fucking cool. Chris had actually previously scared a kid with a Donald Duck impression and got fired from his job at Wendy's, but this was after numerous mess-ups already, like Fleck getting fired from his job for scaring children with a gun. I mean, personally, I think it would have been a very bold choice for Fleck to do a Donald Duck impression for all those kids in the hospital, but misinterpreting what comedy was, causing all them to cry, it would have been a very deep scene. It would have hit really hard.
Why do you enjoy scaring me like this?
Normally, Chris doesn't act upon his vengeful quirks, however, at least not in a physically violent way. Even when a man dressed up as a pickle marched into his date and stole his girlfriend from him, he never fought. He never punched him, he never struck him, he only attempted to de-escalate, which is actually very mature despite how unsuccessful he was. He projects his revenge towards trolls by way of violent fantasies, captured within the self-published comic book Sonichu. Jeez, it took me this long to even mention Sonichu. In one of the final issues, Chris gets his revenge by having a mass execution of all of his enemies, as well as the death by rock and roll of his caricature of the website 4chan, which he calls 4-cent garbage, which he recognized as a source of many of his trolls. This assault by rock and roll resulted in the deaths of 1,500, as well as the fate of his main antagonist Clyde Cash, who perishes holding hands with another, Jack Thaddeus, by jumping down an elevator shaft before the building collapses. It should be noted that at the time of writing this, Chris absolutely hated gay people, so in order to make them do what he think would make them look bad, he had them hold hands while they killed themselves. The surviving trolls were later murdered by Christian and his hedgehog Pokemon compatriots, from a charring death by several simultaneous electric shocks, having multiple holes drilled into their body by a miner before being finally executed by a father and daughter teaming up to kill him, being excessively shot out until bleeding out, and using telekinesis to break a character's body into grotesque positions before blowing up his heart. Fleck shot 3 Wall Street guys, stabbed an old co-worker in the head, suffocated his mom with a pillow, and definitely shot a talk show host on live TV, resulting in a riot. Like in Chris's case, these were all acts of revenge. Only in Fleck's case, they were actualized, rather than the way Chris internalizes everything and chooses to carry out his revenge through creative means. Murray especially was a major bully of Fleck, taking his failed stand-up routine and turning it into essentially what's a period equivalent of a viral fail video, and then inviting him on the show to further mock him for the general public to enjoy, oozing in the schadenfreude of a socially distant and mentally unstable man attempting to do something brave and failing. Liquid Chris, he's a guy who imitated Chris's mannerisms and created the illusion that Chris Chan was the actual imposter, bolstered by the trolls who pretended to believe that Liquid was the real Chris. Liquid decided to dub Chris Chan Ian Brandon Anderson.
My name is not Ian Brandon something! Hello, Ian.
Because of Chris Chan's username that said I be a Chandler. A girl named Casey pretended to be fooled by Liquid and fell in love with him under the assumption that he was the real Chris. Chris Chan, who at this point had been on a, as he calls it, constant love quest, did not take kindly to having a potential girlfriend stolen from him. Liquid semi-closed his arc by emulating the Dark Knight, pretending that Chris Chan had captured him, ironically enough. Hey, wasn't there a Batman the Animated Series episode where some guy pretends to be the Joker 1992? Or was that the guy killed Batman? Anyway, Chris orchestrated a battle of the bands between Liquid and himself, which was to be voted on by several judges. Chris was acting kinda sus, so he was voted out and lost. So, like the aforementioned trolls that followed, Chris depicted himself in his comic book wreaking his revenge upon Liquid, driving the maximum speed limit of 60 miles per hour to save Casey from Liquid's evil clutches by shooting him in the kneecaps Terminator 2 style with his Megatron pistol, which now shoots actual bullets, and making a point of it in the comic that he wounded him. He did not kill him.
Do not hate. Hate is not so good.
This predates Chris's much more violent actions much later towards the rest of the trolls, which shows an escalation of Chris's, even if fantastical, violent tendencies more and more as he was bullied more and more online. But her transition might have very well saved her from falling down a darker path than the Joker 2019 had with his transformation. Like in terms of self-love and charisma and optimism, she rebounded hard when she found herself in her womanhood. She's able to ignore outside threats, find this hidden internalized confidence, and really just be herself, be who she wants to be. I mean, Fleck does this too, but with the confidence he's given, it's the confidence to kill a man on live TV because he laughed at his suffering, dancing in the ashes of the uprising he spurred atop the corpses of 2 policemen. Should be stated that Chris also doesn't like cops, but he very specifically detests mall cops. Actual police officers, he kinda switches back and forth. Christine fantasizes about a cognitive reality in which she's worshipped, like Fleck chooses to actualize. The Sonichu comics exist as more than just a creative outlet to her. She believes in a Roger Rabbit-esque logic or a South Park Imagination Land-esque logic that somewhere out there her creations exist, are real, and feel very genuine emotions and love her. She believes that they all have individual feelings of their own and she's merely putting their words to paper. She says that when she sleeps or enters her closet, she's able to travel to their world for but a brief moment. In life, she's chosen to be married to the Pokemon, Mewtwo, as well as her own creation, Magichan, and she believes we are on the verge of a dimensional merge, the date of which she's falsely predicted a couple of times, in which all of our collective consciousness will ascend from our bodies into the animated world and will be together with our fantasies and all of the world's cartoon characters, or at least the ones that Christine likes and knows about. It's kind of like the human instrumentality about Evangelion, where we go, semi-willingly, to a paradise. Fleck may be seen actualizing his violent fantasies, but he too creates false cognitions. He fantasizes about a neighbor he finds attractive who gave him attention for just a second, and makes her into a female companion. And props to the movie because directionally it's deliberately vague in terms of which scenes she's actually speaking to him or Arthur has willed her to be. Some of them more obvious than others. Kind of like how Christine wills Mewtwo to be as her husband and regularly talks to them like they're imaginary friends. Fleck desires the comfort and reassurance of a woman in his life beyond his mother. Christine will say otherwise, but for a good chunk of his earlier life, he just wanted to get his dick wet like wicked bad.
I look forward to the eventuality of you and me having our sex time together.
I've teased Chris Chan's love quest long enough. It's very obvious that Chris and Fleck both seek a female companion beyond their elderly mother to fill voids in their lives. Chris even seeking a sister to do so. Not for sex, just for companionship. Fleck's deeper desires are never really explored. We just get the impression that he wants an attractive woman at his side who gives him positive advice and reassurance. Also a dad. As we know, he actualizes this through fantasies, with the only 100% definite real confrontation with her being his final one with her in her apartment.
Do not fucking comment saying the first two are real. I already know that. You don't need to say that. Shut up.
All of the others can be interpreted as his cognition creating a fantasy waifu. In these fantasies, he never interacts or acknowledges the existence of the daughter of this girl, so it's definitely not a paternal desire. He's just in need of a female yes man for his actions. With Chris, it's inconsistent. Chris has a strong paternal instinct and greatly wants a daughter named Crystal. Unlike Fleck, however, he refused to have relations with a black woman due to his father ingraining bigotry within him at a very young age. His outgoing idea is that he just wants a sweet woman who he can start a family with, but initially his real desires were much more shallow. He specifically wants a skinny, attractive, white or Asian woman within his age range that he can have sex with, and for the woman to take care of him the same way his parents did, and also give him a child, thus making him into more of a house husband who I would hope at least wants to take care of the kid. Chris was denied sex for years and years, wanting that experience, thinking it will change him, thinking it will make his life. And when he finally got it from a prostitute, it purified his love quest a bit because sex was out of the way, and the most important thing really does feel like it's supposed to be companionship now. Like, the sex with the prostitute didn't improve his life at all, such is the reality of sex. Barb's not going to be around for a whole lot longer, and Christine does not want to be alone after her passing. She's even stated this multiple times in past instances, even during the more shallow arcs of her quest. In the past, she had possessed maternal instincts and in some ways wishes to be able to birth a child of her own, adding to her strong desire to have been naturally born a woman instead of becoming one. Fleck and Chris's differences are small, but large in impact here. One desiring a partner and a source of positivity, and the other desiring a caretaker and the company of his own family. Both of which end up actualizing their desires through cognitive fantasies that they will interpret as reality. Chris has gone through 2, maybe 3 name changes. The third would be if you want to count his very strong connection to his high school Spanish nickname Ricardo as like a big moment. The first major one being his initial changeover from his birth name of Christopher to that of Christian. Inspired by a December trip to the Fashion Square Mall, when speaking to an animatronic bear, the bear misheard him when he told him his name and called him Christian. And little Christopher took this as a profound sign to change his name to one of much more biblical significance. Later on, when she'd fully realized her transition to Tomgirl, she took on the name Christine to better complement this part of her life. Arthur Fleck also had a few name changes, the first being his adoption of the name Fleck with his adoption by Penny Fleck. Later thinking that he might actually be a Wayne, before shedding all of this and rejecting his past and his past identity to become Joker 2019, a man and name of his own choosing. All of these name changes have extreme significance to the respective individuals, both real and fictional. Arthur struggles with his identity, having been lied to in his life twice about his heritage, once about him being the illegitimate son of billionaire Thomas Wayne, which turns out to most likely be a lie by his deranged mother, who also lied to him about his Fleck lineage being his genuine lineage. In donning the label Joker 2019, he rejects his struggle for identity and meaning and instead creates his own and his own symbol. This is not unlike Christine in her namesakes as Ricardo, Christine, or even Christian. Never satiated with what was given to her, molding her own identity and wearing Sonichu medallions and makeup and girls' clothing to find confidence in her own prescribed ideal self and reality. Christine and Fleck are both suffering from extreme cases of isolation within old, dirty, and unfulfilling environments that force them to design their own cognitions to create happiness. In Christine's case, it's a world where all the trolls are dead or banished to the Shadow Realm. She's married to Mewtwo and her own creation Magichan, and all the good people of this earth have ascended to a higher plane of existence, hanging out with cartoon characters. She also hangs Donald Trump and Mike Pence in these fantasies the same way Fleck instigates the murders of wealthy elites, Murray and Wayne. But in Arthur's case, it's taking an actualized, radical stance and burning down the world that rejects him and the other lower classes of society, killing the rich, slaughtering authority, and becoming an image of chaos who everyone always agrees with. And if they disagree with him, then they die. Both even develop bad eating habits because of their parents to opposite extremes. Christine's poor eating habits causing bloating and Arthur starving himself to the point of malnourishment. Fleck is a regular smoker, but Chris despises smoking and sees it as an easy way to speed yourself to death, having witnessed a heavy smoking family member, Aunt Karina, die of lung cancer on his birthday. Well, no, not exactly. The funeral was on his birthday. She didn't die on his birthday. The extreme, dirty, and old-fashioned environments in which they lived served to further distance them from normal society, teaching what little social behavior they understand as one of fighting or one of corny TV shows and cartoons, an old-fashioned belief, an old-fashioned way of living, suffering from an extended lifetime of cyberbullying, abuse, and a lack of real empathy from the world around them, forcing them further into their states of loneliness and worsening their already fragile mental stability. Christine's deepest desire was and has always been companionship, whether familial, romantic, or sexual. An unfortunate side effect to this desire was trolling, as in her quest for attention brought the side effect of bullying. This perpetually serves to impact her, and when having to navigate a web of lies left behind by trolls and from her parents, she's lost connection and lost track of many of her ties to reality, pulling strange and out there stunts now just so people will pay attention to her. There's a good reason Christine's life is so well kept within public records, and it's only partially because of blackmail or deception from the trolls. There are many, many instances of Chris just deciding to tell the whole world things about him or herself that no one should really know about. Like that whole thing of cutting a vagina hole open? That's all known, like very well known, because she linked photos of it to a Facebook post after telling everybody she grew one. At this point, I think as much as she wants to be left alone, and she should be left alone and treated well by someone special to find love, she knows that her mother will soon pass away, and the only way to get attention, the only way that has perpetually succeeded in getting attention, is to grab negative attention, seek hatred or embarrassment, so people will look at her and laugh. Dare I say something like a clown? Dare I say something like someone who takes a radical stance? But who knows? I could be going too far. Because of this, in many ways, she exemplifies the worst traits in humanity, not by looking upon the screen and gazing at her being a goofball, by looking into the reflection and looking at ourselves. Our desire as a species for dominance comes with it the seeds of hatred, to find a problem when one may not exist, to look down upon others as we are superior, we are perfect, it is they who are fat, ugly, poor, stupid, and of an older, ignorant mindset of thinking. It is we who are always correct, smart, and always beautiful when compared to so low of a creature, to such a clown. Christine's transition, from a certain point of view, isn't as radical as Arthur's, ironically both finding happiness in wearing makeup, one being a clown, one being girl makeup. But one of them, Christine, is able to find peace in this transition, while the other seeks retribution in his transformation. I'd like to think of Christine's transition as what could really be the start of a happier ending. She's finally accepted herself for what she really is and doesn't harm others by doing so. Contrary to the case of Arthur Fleck, who is supposed to become one of the most insane and murderous comic book villains ever created. In many ways, with how much we know about Christine, she's had it harder. Like, in a lot of ways, she's had it harder, at least mentally. Maybe not physically, but definitely mentally. And she's still, to this day, trapped in an Arthur Fleck-esque environment. But she has the power to be herself and live beyond this environment. She has the power to escape. Even in death, she will be cursed by Barbara's mounting debt that she will inherit, and she's cursed by this general sense of overall laziness. But I really think she's taking the first steps in her life to finally be happy. So for God's sake, leave her the hell alone already. I know this video's pitch definitely is not helping that, but she deserves to live her life now. Let history be history and stop trying to mess with a person who has already had it so fucking hard, who does not deserve this anymore. You might still be wondering why I didn't write this video about someone like Elliot Rodger, a mass shooter and an incel who wrote a manifesto detailing his off-kilter life perspective in his biased life story. And most of that's because Elliot didn't actually have it that hard. He was legit just like a self-aggrandizing prick. And he's equally unreliable as a narrator as the Joker 2019 is. Christine may not always have the most accurate tales, the most accurate stories, or the most accurate memories, at least the ones that she tells us. But we have an insurmountable amount of videos, audio, and testimonies from multiple sources to form something of an objective truth. From a mental health perspective, it's honestly up to you which story and which transformation led to a greater and more fulfilling existence. They both set themselves free and allowed themselves to be happy, but in two completely different ways. Christine's unfortunately still lazy and stuck under a mountain of her mom's crippling debt, and Joker 2019's a goddamn maniac. But it's just so strange to me how similar the upbringings of a fictional character and a real girl are, and how they led to two very divergent results despite having very similar causes. The general concept of mental health is not taken seriously in this country, as can be clearly seen if you step out to the Skid Rows or the Methadone Miles of any major city. We just let them scatter the earth like rats, putting a half-assed effort into actually helping them before dumping them right back into an enabling environment. Because you look at all those people, those poor, suffering people on the street, and it's easier to laugh at them or ignore than it actually is to find a solution to an issue or be a major force for some kind of change. It's easier to just let them be than to help them. And I'm really worried that with all the debt that Barbara has, and with Chris's attitude and laziness and the way he's structured his life thus far, she might end up just like that, alone on the streets, with a bunch of boring losers on the internet, still trying to point and laugh at her. If you want to do something, maybe start by not being a useless piece of shit. Maybe start by offering a positive influence on her life. Try to offer a positive influence on the life of anyone you know who might be suffering and deserve basic human empathy. Like, that's a start. The basic emotion of empathy is a start. Christine's life is so lacking in empathy or sympathy already. She may be lazy. She may have trouble learning. She may be a bit naive. But that doesn't mean she can't at least try. We should, just let her be. And let her try. For God's sake, leave her alone. Because if you keep antagonizing and antagonizing, then sooner or later you might just get what you fucking deserve.